Hello, welcome to the Chirp YouTube channel. My name is Christy. I am your friendly online speech language pathologist and specialist in children's communication development, including behavior, because behavior is a type of communication. Today, we're going to talk about the second developmental stage in children's relating and engaging, and how we can recognize a possible hang-up and how we can address that hang-up so that the child can get back on the path of healthy development. This second stage is the stage of engaging and relating. This is the stage where a very young child begins to tune in to special people in her life, usually caregivers, always caregivers, because who else is a very young child going to be interacting with, and build relationships, build safe, reciprocal, enjoyable, pleasurable relating with those people. This can be a challenge for some children. Typically, this skill solidifies between 2 and 7 months of age. It's a very early developing skill, much like our previous one that we talked about in that video. However, because this is typically such an early developing skill, and because families typically assume that this should happen automatically, usually families don't realize that this window has passed and their child has not mastered this ability quite yet. So typically when I meet a child further down the line, when I'm called in because a child isn't talking or is having behavior problems, when the child is 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 or 10, typically, and I'm talking years old, not months old, typically, the parents don't even realize that this window has gone by without the child having learned this skill. We have to learn how to relate to other people as well, and it's more difficult for some children than others. Some of the reasons behind this are some of the same reasons we talked about in the previous video about why children have difficulty regulating themselves, staying calm, and being interested in the world around them. Sometimes some kind of sensory disorder, maybe they're hypersensitive to touch, maybe they're having internal problems because they have difficulty with digestion or a food allergy. Perhaps they are craving sensory input and those needs aren't getting met, so they're having difficulty managing the signals from the world around them. It's the same thing with engaging and relating. If those same needs are still not getting met, then the child is going to have difficulty mastering the next level of development as well. So it's no wonder that a child could get to the age of 3 or 4 or 7 or 10 and still not have managed the ability to engage with other people and build relationships with them. That doesn't mean that the child doesn't have the capability or that the child will never gain that skill. What it means is that we have to put purposeful intention into helping the child develop those skills. The goal is not to force the child to interact with us. The goal is to woo and entice the child into interacting with us. You know that a child is doing well in this area when the child seeks a caregiver's face, when the child is looking for a specific person, when the child is smiling and laughing and responding to your facial expressions or a silly song, or you dingle her little hat, or whatever the case is. Whatever you do, the child responds and you have built a circle of communication. I do something, the child does something, and then I do something again. This is a circle, and this is a healthy start to a communication and to a relationship. That's what we want. We want the child to be engaged and relating rather than distant rather than avoiding human interaction, rather than only being willing to sit alone and do things alone without other people around. Being alone and refusing to engage or relate or interact is a problem because we learn from interaction, especially when we're very, very young. When we're older, we can learn from a book. Yes, we can. But when we are very young, we are programmed to learn from other humans. We have special neurons called mirror neurons, which make us learn from other people. If we are not interacting with other people, we're not learning in the way that we were wired to. So, how can we work on this skill in our children or our clients or our students or kids we volunteer with? The first thing is that we have to pay attention to what the child is interested in. A lot of our kids who avoid humans as much as possible have some pretty different interests. Sometimes people think they're strange. Maybe they like to turn the faucet on and off. Maybe they like to shut and open cabinet doors. Maybe they like to drive a car back and forth, back and forth. Maybe they just like to watch their fingers. These are things that it's hard for us as neurotypical people who have passed through this level of development. It's difficult for us to understand why that's pleasurable. But clearly it is because the child is doing it and appears to be receiving some sort of comfort or pleasure from it. Therefore, we need to participate and pay attention to the same activities in order to build rapport. If you have a teenager, a typically developing teenager, who's super interested in a particular band, and you want to build rapport with your teenager, you're going to learn about that band. You're going to talk about that band. You're going to go see that band together. This is what we're doing with a very young child as well. We're paying attention to what the child likes and what the child is interested in, regardless of whether it's something that piques our interest. I'm going to show interest in what the child is interested in by doing the same thing that the child is doing. If the child is driving a car back and forth, I'm going to drive a car back and forth. If the child is wiggling her fingers in front of her face, I'm going to wiggle my fingers in front of my face. If the child is turning the water on and off, I'm going to join in turning the water on and off. It's a little bit trickier because there's probably only one faucet in the kitchen or the bathroom. But if there are two in a bathroom, then you have your work cut out for you. If we're opening and closing cabinet doors, then we are opening and closing cabinet doors together. And we are doing this at a pace and in a way that is not threatening to the child. We're doing it at a pace and in a way that is enjoyable for the child. We want the child to get excited because another human being is interested in what she's interested in. Usually, what happens is that when I join a child in one of these activities, not every child, but a lot of times a child will look at me out of the corner of her eye with surprise. Usually these kids are not kids who do direct eye contact very often. I have a video about that right there. That's part of the human avoidance thing. It's very threatening. If you have an oversensitive sensory system, oversensitive body, looking at other people can be very threatening. And it can be distracting from all of the other things going on in your world. So usually the kids will look at me out of the corner of their eye. Is she really opening and closing cabinet doors with me? Nobody's ever done this with me before. I think she might be different from everyone else. I need to keep my eye on that. And when I show joy, opening and closing the door, when I giggle or watch her with expectation, we're building rapport. We are building a relationship. There might not be any words yet, but I am showing that I'm trustworthy. I value what you value, and therefore we can be friends. We're forming a relationship of shared interest. And even if it's not real shared interest, I care enough to see what's so great about this activity with you. What if you don't want your child to be opening and closing cabinet doors or driving a truck back and forth? I don't care. We need to be doing it anyway. Obviously, if it's something like a fridge that's very wasteful, and if you have a cabinet where there are dangerous chemicals, you need to put a lock. That's not a cabinet where we're doing this. But if it's not dangerous and if it is not wasting tons of money, then do it anyway. It doesn't matter if this behavior is adaptive or if it is just fun for the child. There are lots of things you do, I bet, that are wasteful or that are meaningless to other people, but they're meaningful to you. And how nice would it be if you had a best friend who was willing to do those things with you and who didn't think that they were a waste of time? That would be great, wouldn't it? You can be that friend for your child or your student. The next step is going to be, we're going to just push the envelope a little bit. If we have caught the child's eye, if we can see a gleam in the child's eye, as Dr. Greenspan phrased it, then we're going to make it a little more complex. We are going to do something a little bit different. We don't want to make it too threatening. So if we're opening and closing cabinet doors, I might simply say, open, close, open, close. And I might make it a little pattern and see if the child does any imitating, or if the child waits for me to open and close and then she opens and closes. I could play all sorts of games with cabinets. You need to be creative. Think about this as a way to play. Adult humans need play just as much as kids do. And you can play with your child. It helps your brain as much as it helps your child's brain. And of course, it is helping your relationship. It's helping your child learn to engage and relate with you. And along this process, one of the goals is that your child learns to feel safe and to trust that you are not going to be someone who overwhelms her sensory system or who forces her to do things that are painful or really frightening or uncomfortable for her. Yes, children need to do things that are slightly uncomfortable, but nobody who sees you as an offense, nobody who sees you as a forceful, bossy person is going to want to build a relationship with you. That's not really how relationships work. Relationships work when we can trust each other. And by showing interest in the child's interest, and by participating in the child's interest with joyful expectation and with a careful awareness of what is too much for the child, and when it is, you back off. This is building trust with the child, which is very important for your future relationship. As I just mentioned, you want to assess constantly as you are playing whatever game it is that you create together. Assess, how is the child doing with this? Have I advanced things too far? Did I do an A, B, B, A pattern with the cabinet door and my child has no idea what a pattern is? That's too much and she's tuned out again and now she's off opening and closing the bathroom door. We need to pay attention. When our child starts tuning out again, something has gone wrong. We're no longer engaged with each other and we're no longer relating to one another. Therefore, I need to figure out what went wrong. Usually, the child can only handle that level of human interaction for 30 seconds before she needs to tune out again because she has not got the stamina yet to maintain that kind of human interaction. Expect that. Play your little game for 30 seconds if that's all your child can do, and then back off and we sit still for a little while and we're waiting. If she looks at us again with expectation, then we play again until she tunes out again. If it is my fault that she tuned out because I was overbearing or I was too loud or my face was too excited, which can happen, that can be very overwhelming for a child, or I touched her too much, or my cabinet made a loud noise and that was not part of the game, then I need to assess myself and adjust the game as I go. Assess and adjust. It is harder than it sounds because children are all different and the games that they want to play with us are all different, although they share a lot in common. So now that I have worked with so many different kids, now that I have played these interesting and unique games with so many different kids, I'm pretty good at it. I'm pretty good at assessing when a child has reached the limit and I need to stop. But sometimes I still push a little bit too far and the child tunes out again. But that's okay because I can just take it up when she's ready. And so can you. What I'm saying when I'm saying assess and adjust is make sure the child is still enjoying the interaction. It's very important as we are building a relationship of engagement that the child is enjoying it, because we don't engage in things that aren't pleasurable to us. There's a reason the child is driving the car back and forth. That's pleasurable for some reason. Not to me, but to that child. There's a reason the child is turning the water on and off. That's pleasurable for some reason. Not to me, but to the child. We want interacting with us to also be pleasurable to the child so that the child wants to interact with humans more. It can build that duration, that stamina to engage with us for longer periods of time and therefore learn from that interaction. Sometimes I think about this as the child. Did you ever watch Stranger Things? You know how there's the upside down? Think about the child being in the upside down. The upside down in this scenario is that there's no human interaction down there. There is nice, quiet aloneness and no irritating people to bother us or touch us or disturb our calm equilibrium. However, up there in the right side up, the normal world, people are interacting all the time. That's where all the learning happens, but it is quite noisy and it is a little chaotic sometimes, and people do stuff I don't understand and they don't do things that I think are fun sometimes. So my job as, in this case, the speech language pathologist, I'm trying to communicate, teach this child to communicate more effectively. And in your case, perhaps you are a parent or a grandparent or a teacher. What your job is to go into the upside down, bring a little bit of your interaction with you so that you can pull the child for longer and longer times up into the right side up world so that your child gets more and more used to being part of the flow of humanity and engagement and relating, even though maybe it didn't initially come very naturally to her. It is something that can be learned, and it is something that we definitely should pay attention to and teach when we see that a child is struggling in that area. That is what I have to say today about the developmental stage of engaging and relating. There will be more to come, of course, so please subscribe if you haven't already. You don't want to miss the rest of this series, and you don't want to miss any random things that might pop up that you might need to know. So come back next time, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for being here. Bye.